Hey guys, it's Mike from Menu Development, and we're going to start off our the War tutorial series here. First part of this, we're going to look at the resource dictionaries and how to get those to where our application can use those. We'll be making two resource dictionaries this time around. It'll be the Brushes.xaml and the CommonControls.xaml. Brushes will hold on to all of our brushes, and the CommonControls will hold on to the styles for two styles for the buttons that we'll be using inside this application. And then we'll show you how to set that up inside the App.xaml so you can actually make use of those resources. So first thing we'll do is let's go ahead and create a new project here. Make sure you got WPF application, and we'll call this War Tutorial Series. Click OK. You can name this anything you want. Once that's up, what we'll do is let this designer load here. Okay, we come up here with just a standard initial project. You'll see over here in our solution, we've got the War Tutorial Series. Got one project here. I got standard properties, references, and all that. We can go ahead and close out of the main window and the code behind for that. What we'll do first is let's go ahead and right click on our project. Go down to Add, New Folder, and let's type in Resource Dictionaries. Okay, now we got that added. We're gonna have two files in here. So right click on the folder we just made, Add, and we'll go down to Resource Dictionary. What that does, instead of just making a new item, it goes ahead and it selects the item that we want, so we can Resource Dictionary, so we can go ahead and just start typing the name. Now, the first one that we'll make is going to be called Brushes. Click on Add, and let's go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to hold on to some of the brushes that we'll be needing for this for the War tutorial series. This application is going to have some custom buttons. There'll be two of them. One of them will be the menu buttons that you saw for the new game, the rules, the exit game, and then once you're inside the game, there's one for the start the new game, shuffle, and then return to main menu. So all those they're going to be using the same style that we set up for that button, which is going to be kind of cool to show you how you can set one style up and then use it across your application. And you can actually use things like dynamic resources and all that to apply effects across your application, like different colors and stuff like that. Or you can choose to use static resources, which we'll get into a little bit later about how they load up and all that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and make our brushes. So we want to start this up. So once you start typing, you see here that it's going to automatically select what's available. For the most part, this is always what you can do. Sometimes there are a few things that this doesn't work for, but once you got what you want here, you can go up and down with your arrow keys. So once it's highlighted, you just hit tab. It'll automatically fill that in for you. When you set up a key, the same thing there with the tab. Once I had what I wanted on the list, hit tab, it auto completed and put me inside the parentheses so I can keep going. Or I'm sorry, the quotation, so I can keep going. So the first color we'll set up is the color that's going to be used for the text inside of our button. I'm just going to call that War Button Text Brush. You can call it whatever you want. And we're going to set up a color. Now this color we're going to use the alpha channel with the red, green, and blue, so we can get some kind of, we can set it what type of transparency we want on it. Since we're going to kind of give these like glass looks where you can see through them a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give this on the alpha, I'll put 45. I'm sorry, got to put the pounds on first. 45, and then you can just put in your regular, your red, green, blue values. So I'm going to use a white here, so it's going to be, F for red, green, and blue. Go ahead and close that out, and we'll come down here and start making our next brush. This one's going to be called, I'll call it War Button Brush, I guess. This is just going to be our standard brush for like if there's nothing going on with the button, no hovering or pushing or anything like that on it. So set this up, and I'm going to use this here. Feel free to use these if you want, or you can play around with your own color values. Set the next one up, and this one is going to be used for the border of the brush. And again, some of these, we probably won't be reusing them, so we could just set this up in the style, but I just want to show you guys, give you some experience with how to use these solid color brushes in a resource dictionary when we go to our styles. So, plus it makes them easier to find and change later on if you put them in this way, but however you guys want to set it up is fine. So for this one, I'm going to use this color here. Our next key is going to be, our next brush is going to be used for the active brush. So if the mouse is hovering over it and it's not disabled, how it was changing colors there, we want to set one up for that. So whatever color you guys want to use for that one. The next one here we're going to use is going to be for whenever the button is pressed. So whatever you guys want to use for that one, go ahead and set that color up. And the last color or last brush we'll set up here is going to be another solid color brush. And this one is going to be used when the button's disabled. So whatever you guys want to set up for that color, feel free. So that's got our brushes set up. Okay. Zoom back out there. The next thing we're going to do is right click on the resource dictionaries folder again. And we're going to actually start working with our styles now for our buttons. So resource dictionary. You can call this whatever you want. I'm just going to call it Common Controls. Click add here. Now, what we're going to do in here, like I said, we're going to create two styles. One's going to be, if you remember the introduction video there, we had the buttons on the main menu, the buttons at the bottom of the game board there, where you can do like the start new game, shuffle, return to main menu, that kind of stuff. That's going to be one style. The other style is, if you remember when we were playing, the mouse went over that bottom little card place there and it turned to like a hand. You can click and you can play your next card and so forth. That will be another style that we'll set up here too. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit there. Okay, so let's set up the button that we're going to use for the main menu and stuff first. Those type of buttons. So we'll set up a style. Key here is going to be WarMenuButton, and that's how we can get a hold of the style later on. Target type is going to be a type of button. Okay. So now what we need to do here is we need to set a few properties for our button. So let's go ahead. First property that we'll set will be the foreground, which is going to be our text color. And if you remember what we did there, I'll give it a value here. What we did for the foreground color for our button is we set up a brush over here. And that brush was the WarButton text brush. So let's go ahead and just copy that. And we're going to give this a static resource. And copy that key in. So you see here when we did the static resource, it's asking for a resource key, and that's going to be that key that we have assigned to this brush here. So we go ahead and close that out. Now just a little bit on the static resource versus like a dynamic resource. What happens there is a static resource, when your application is loaded, that's when that static resource is resolved and assigned to whatever property you're setting it to. Any changes made to that resource will not take effect because it's only assigned once. So it's only like, say if we have a static resource for this button for the text value, we'll make it a static resource and we set it to white, but later on in our application we update that resource, this resource here. So if we updated this one to be a different color, a static resource would not reflect that change. Now a dynamic resource, on the other hand, it would do that. Well, the way it works is it's assigned an expression object to to the property during when your application is loaded. And then what happens is whenever that value is requested, that's when, during the runtime, that's when the resource is actually received. So like if I'm not really explaining that very well. So basically, giving you an example here, if we had this as a dynamic resource on a button for the text, and we made a change to that in our application, so we changed the color of this brush to a different color, that resource would take into account that change and it would update. So we'll find that. Now there is a couple things you need to know when using static versus dynamic resources. A dynamic resource can be set before, like in the example before it's actually set up as to what that is. A static resource cannot. So if we had, let's say this brushes, let's say we had this brush, the solid color brush inside this resource dictionary here. If we had the brush set up above the style, we could use it as a static resource, but if it was set up below the style, we could not, because it has not been set up yet. Trying to keep this a little high level so it's easy to understand. Since this is our introduction, our first series of WPF, I don't want to get too far in the weeds with what each thing is, but I would like to give you guys a basic background of some of this stuff. So that's basically the two differences between a static and dynamic resource. Just remember that, and I'll show you an example of that a little bit later of what I'm talking about. Okay, so we've got that set up. The next thing we're going to have to set is going to be the template. So do a setter, property, template. Now inside here, you see how up here we've done this, we just set the value inside here, but we're not going to be able to do that here because we're actually going to have, well, you'll see why. So the way you get around that, when you guys set up something like this, you do setter.value. Now we've actually taken this and broken it out to where we can actually set this control template. So we're going to specify control template, and we'll give it a target type, and it's going to be a button. Okay, so, and don't worry about this blue line. We'll actually see it's saying it cannot be resolved, but this will go away when we set up a resource dictionaries in the App.xaml file. So looking at the control template here, what this is going to do is it's going to give us specify like the visual structure and any kind of behavioral stuff that's going to happen with this style, or with this control basically. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to go ahead and we'll have to set up like a border, and inside that border we'll set up a grid, and the style kind of come to life inside this right here. So if we look at it, we'll go ahead and set up a border. We'll have to name this border because if we'll need to call this later on, like when we do the transforms and the background changes, stuff like that. So just name it button border. Now if you remember, the buttons were rounded, and the way we do that is we set a corner radius here. We'll set it to 20. You guys can play around with that and set whatever value you want. We will set a border thickness. We do want the border to show up. We'll give it a thickness of 1. And here's where some of these resources are going to come into. We're going to use these as static resources here as well, but like we said before, we went over what the dynamic and static are about. So the background we're going to use here is a static resource. And if we go back to look, this is going to be our default color for our button. So we'll just copy that out, put that in for the key. Now if we look at the border brush, we did set up another resource for that. I have a solid color brush over here. The border, just copy that out. You don't have to copy, you can just type it out if you want, but it's easier just to copy paste. And then what we're going to have to do for this is give it a render transform, an origin for the render transform. So we do render transform origin. So this is going to be relative to the element that you're working with. So, and it's going to be a 0 to 1 for width and height. So we want to go to the center. So it's going to be 0.5. So we're going to the center of the width, and 0.5. So we're going to the center height-wise as well. So now inside the border here, we want to set up a grid. And this grid is going to have 2 rows. Row definitions. And this is how we set up the rows for a grid. We won't have any we won't have any columns in this, so we don't have to specify any column definition since it's just going to have 1 column. We will need to set up 2 rows, so inside the row definition here, we're going to set up each one of those rows by setting up a new row definition. We're going to set this height to star. Now what this is going to do is going to be like kind of a weighted proportion of the available space, and I'll show you how this is going to work. So the row definition, the height is going to equal 2.2 star. And you guys can play around with these values, and depending on what you do with these styles later on, make it your own. So basically, if we were to look at this, let's say this was 10. So this is going to equal out to 1 star. This is going to be 10 star. So that's going to give you basically 11. I like to think of it as 11 total units. So you'll have 1 plus 10 equals 11 total units, right? So now we've got this one, which equates to 1 star. So it's going to get 1/11th of the available space that's left over from whatever, like if we had the actual height specified here. And then this one, the second one, would get 10/11ths of the available space. So that's kind of what that does, okay? Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'm not sure if I explained it very well or not, but so we'll set that back to 2.2 for that. And then inside this grid, we're going to actually set up another border. So I'll go ahead and set up a border. And we're going to put this in grid row 1. So it'll be 0 since the index starts at 0. So that'll be the first row available. And the corner radius for this is going to be 20, 20, 0, 0. And that just sets, you got your left top, right bottom. So inside this border, we're going to work with the background here. Okay, so what we're going to do here, if you remember the buttons, they didn't follow they didn't look like one color. They looked like it was kind of a gradient. So we're going to set up a linear gradient brush in here. And we could set this up inside of our brushes resource as well if we wanted to. So do a start point here. And this again is 0 to 1. So we're going to go halfway through the width and start at the top. And our endpoint is going to be still halfway at the width, and then we'll go all the way to the bottom. So this means we're going to draw a straight line from the top down to the bottom. In the middle, that is. So we want to set up a few stops along the way here to give us our gradient. So we want to do a gradient stop, set up our colors to be, I've got these written down here. This is just what I came up with. You guys can set what you want, put the offsets for each one. Okay. All right, so let's get that set up. So now we have the border set up. What we're going to do is we're going to set up our content presenter. And this is going to be, think of this as a placeholder for content. At runtime, it'll get inserted to whatever, the content is specified for the control. So this is basically going to display the content of our button, basically. So we'll just do content presenter. Go ahead and scroll down here a little bit, center this up. Give it a name here. I'll name it button content presenter. Now we need to look at the vertical and horizontal content alignment inside of our button because we want the text to be centered. But more importantly, we want this to actually span the entire height and width of the button, our content, right? So we want the text to make use of the whole button size. So what we'll do for that is we're going to set up a grid.rowSpan, set this to 2, and that's going to allow us to use both of those rows instead of just constraining it to 1 row. So it will go the entire width and height of our button. Since we only have 1 column, we don't need to specify a column span. And let's look at the vertical alignment. We'll set that to center, and then we'll work at the horizontal alignment. We'll set that to center. So that'll center our content up for us. And let me go ahead and close this out. Okay, so now that we have this set up, we've got our visual set up to the point that our button would actually look like something, right? It would have a custom style applied to it. But we want to go a little bit farther with that and give it some triggers. That way we can interact with the button differently depending on, if it's enabled, if the mouse is over it, the user presses on it, kind of make it come to life for us. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to set up some triggers. So we need to do control, content control, control template. So we're still inside of our control template here. It's very important you don't go outside of that, and we'll do a dot, and we're going to look at the triggers. And inside here, we'll set up our triggers. So we're going to use a couple different kinds of triggers. We're going to use a multi-trigger, because some of these have more than one condition that need to be met for it to happen. And we're going to use just a regular standard trigger, which only looks at one condition. So the first one we're going to look at is, when the mouse is over the button and the button is enabled. If you remember in the introduction video, we had it grow a little bit and change colors, so we'll set that one up first. So we'll do a multi-trigger. Now inside this trigger we need to set up the conditions, so we'll do multi-trigger.conditions. And inside these conditions we'll set the first condition, and it's going to look at the property is mouse over. So if the mouse is over, set that to true. So if the mouse is over, we also need to make sure that the button is enabled, because if it's disabled, we don't really care if the mouse is over it. So condition property is enabled. So if it is enabled and the mouse is over it, we want it to do something. So come outside of our conditions here, and let's go ahead and do it. Set up a setter. We want to set a property, and what we're going to do is, if you remember, the button grows a little bit when the mouse is over it if it's enabled. So, and we set up above here this render transform origin. So we've got the render transform origin set up to be the center of the button. So what we want to do is we want to make that button grow. So looking at the property here, we're going to do render transform, and we're going to set, we need to do a target name, and we're going to call into this button border here, because this is what we want to make happen, because this is, what houses are grid and all that. So we want this to actually grow, so we'll just copy that out. So we're going to target that, and then inside of it do a setter.value, set up a transform group, and now what we're going to do is we're going to scale this up. So scale transform, and we're going to scale the X and Y, because we want it to grow in both width and height. So scale X, we'll scale to 1.1, scale Y 1.1. This is going to make it grow a little bit both width and height. But we also want to be able to set that new color that we've set up for the active button, right? So come down here, we'll set another setter. What we're going to do is look at the property of the background property. Again, we're going to target the same thing, the button border, and we're going to set the value of the background property to a static resource that we've already set up, and that's going to be the, if we go back over here and see what we named it, the active WarButton brush. So we'll copy that, or whatever you guys name that, set that there, close that out. Let's go back out a little bit there. Okay. So now that we have that set up, we've got that trigger finished. So the other one we want to look at, is if the button is pressed and enabled. So basically we can go ahead and we can just copy this multi-trigger right here. So we'll copy this, Control C and Control V to paste. So now if we look at this one, we just need to change a few things on it. We've already got everything else set up the way we want it. So we need to make sure it's enabled, but we don't care if the mouse is over it, because you can't press it if the mouse isn't over it. So we want to look at is pressed. So if the button is pressed and it's enabled, we want to actually make this shrink a little bit to look like the button's pushed in. So what we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll change this to 0.9 for both the X and Y. And that's going to make the button look like it shrinks a little bit for us. Only other thing we need to do is we need to set this to the proper brush. So we'll come over here and, mine's called pressed WarButton brush. We can go ahead and paste that. Okay. All right, so we've got that set up. Now the only other thing we need to do is account for if the button's disabled. So that's just going to take, that's just a regular trigger. There's only one condition that we need to check here. So set the trigger. The property that we're going to look at is going to be is enabled. And if it is false, so if it's not enabled, we're going to use a setter, set the property for the background. Again, target name is going to be, button border, same as before. But what we want to do is we want to set this value up to be that resource that we set up for the disabled button, which would be disabled WarButton here. Okay, so we've got that set up. So that really has that style set up for us. Now we have one other style that we need to set up, so let's get ready for that. What do we do here? Oh yeah, we didn't close that out. There we go. So our next style here, there we go. We're going to use to be that the piece where you can click on to play your card. The player's piece down there that he can click on for the game board. So let's go ahead and set that up. So style, give it a key. We'll call it PlayerDeckButton. And then it's going to be, again, a target type is going to be a button. Oops. Okay. So inside the style, we're going to set up a few things. We'll have to set the background. We don't really want a background to show up for this initially. So setter, property, background, value just going to be transparent. Okay. So another thing we're going to set up is the foreground. Oops, property, value, and what we're going to do here is we're just going to pull the color from the operating system. Static resource, static system colors, control text brush key. Now I won't really go into that one right now. I can go into that a little bit more in depth with anybody. If you guys want, just let me know the forums or whatever. We can talk about what we're doing there. I want to kind of keep this one, like I said, a little higher level. I don't want to make it where it's not useful for everybody, but I don't want to get off on a tangent in some of this stuff, and some people may not be really care about what that right there does. So if you guys do want to know, just let me know. But let's go ahead and continue here. Do property, horizontal content alignment. Now this, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to, the content inside this button where we want to put it. So value is going to be center. Another setter here. The vertical. Value is going to be center. Then, we don't want any padding to start with. So we'll just go ahead and set this down. Padding. Value equals 0. Oops. Okay. And then another thing we need to do is, like before, we need to set up our template. Template. Setter.value. Okay, so now we're ready to set up our template. So let's go ahead and control template. Target type again is going to be the button. Okay. So what do we need to do in this one? We'll need to go ahead and set up another grid, and we'll use that to hold our content. Then we'll also have a content presenter in this one, and we'll need to set up a trigger, because if you remember, when the user's mouse went over that play area for the where the player's cards are, it changed to a hand. The cursor changed to a hand. We'll need to set that up. So we'll do is, let's go ahead and set that up here. So we'll go ahead, set up a grid, set the background, and what we're going to do is set template binding to be the background. Now, a little bit about what we're doing there. Template binding is, it's used to bind to element properties within the template definition. You can set it up a different way. So if we were to look at it, instead of doing this, we could do something like, let's say we were binding to, I don't know, the padding. So if we're doing padding here, well, let's say margin. Okay, say we're doing margin. We could do this by doing binding margin relative source equals relative source templated parent. So that, and we could do it this way, but there's not really a point to. We can go ahead and shortcut that by template binding it to the background property. Okay, so what we're saying here is this is going to be the background property, if that makes sense. If not, that's another thing. I can go into that with you guys on the forums or however, just let me know. So now we got that one. I'm going to set snap to device pixels to be true there, since we are going to be, our image is going to have a small line around the border. And that's it for the grid. So inside of our grid here, we need to set up our content presenter like before. And inside, we'll look at the horizontal alignment, and we're going to set this to template binding horizontal content alignment. So hopefully that makes sense to what we're doing there. If not, like I said, I can go over it with you guys later on. Not sure I explained that one very well. So set up the vertical alignment. We'll set up the margin, and we want the margin to go off the padding. So template binding padding, and then that's the device pixels again. Template binding. Okay, close that out. Okay, so now we've got our property or our style set up. We just need to make sure to remember to do the triggers. Sorry, I couldn't think there for a minute. So inside of our control template still, let's do control template. Oops. Dot triggers. Okay. So in here, like we said, we just need to just a regular trigger. We only got one condition to check, and if the mouse is over this button, which is going to be where the cards are at for the player, we want the cursor to change to that hand cursor. So we're going to do trigger property is mouse over. If it is over, we want to go ahead and do setter property. We want to set the cursor, and the value is going to be hand. So you see there's some other standard stuff here you can choose, but just do hand. Alright, so that's got that set up. So I know we're running kind of long here. Let's go ahead and quickly take a look over at what we need to do to get these set up for application to use. Now you'll notice here that the blue line, looks like I made a mistake there. Hold on one second here. Background. What was I trying to set there? Oh, that's not border brush. There we go. Now we have that correct. You see that these the blue lines are under these, and it says, war button text brush could not be resolved. Now the reason that is because it doesn't know about this yet. So we'll set that up. I'll go ahead and save everything there. Sorry about that mistake there, guys. And we'll go over to the App.xaml file. Double click on that. So we're going to use resource dictionaries as we see to set up some of this stuff, but we'll have more than one. So we're going to set up merge dictionaries. Now, a resource dictionary is just think of it something that's holding on to, all your resources that are going to be used by your stuff inside your application, and it's going to have, it's kind of like a dictionary or a hash table, whatever. It's got the key and value. But what you can do is you can use merge dictionaries, and it's going to kind of combine those together. But there is something to remember about merge dictionaries. Duplicate keys are not invalid. So if, say, we had the same key in this Brushes and Common Controls resource dictionaries, we're not going to get any errors to let us know, hey, there's duplicates in there. It'll still run fine. But the thing to remember is the way that lookup behavior works when you're using merge dictionaries is that it's going to search the last added resource dictionary first until it finds a key. So if we have duplicate keys, it'll search that last added first. When it finds it, it's going to use that, whatever's with that key, and it won't hit the next one. So just remember that, okay, when you're setting these up. But real quick, let's go ahead and just set them up. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So resource dictionary. All right, so we're going to set, application resources to use a resource dictionary, but we're going to have more than one, so we need to merge those together. So resource dictionary dot merged dictionaries, and inside that we set up a resource dictionary, so each one of them. So our source is going to be equal to, and we put these in resource dictionaries, as you can see here. So we need to type that in with a /, and then we're just going to have to call what we want. So we'll put the brushes first. Okay. Now we can just copy this one and paste it, since we're going to be coming from the same direction or into the same location. And we just need to put common controls. Now you'll see that, let me go ahead and save this real quick. You'll see those blue underlines aren't there anymore because it can actually find it now. So it knows where that's at. That pretty much wraps up this first part. And the next part, what we're going to do is we're going to actually start looking into the main menu window, get that set up, put our buttons in there, and talk about that a little bit. I hope you guys found it useful so far. Like I said, if you have any questions on anything I went over, I know we went kind of long, tried to speed up some of it, just let me know. But I appreciate it, guys, and I will see you in our next one. Thanks. Bye.